Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Squawk Talk on Socialist Telly. I'm delighted to welcome you onto the show, and I'm delighted to welcome our four very special guests who have, will be in the process of writing themselves into Liverpool Labour folklore, I imagine, given what else has happened in history in the city. We have four councillors who are among the 7 that last week were the only ones out of 60 odd in the city in the Labour group to have the courage to vote against cuts proposed by the mayor and the council leadership that will have a huge impact on the vulnerable people in the city. And just for a bit of context, I'm a boy back in the 80s. There were 47 Liverpool councillors who refused to vote for a cuts budget and were told that they were back in an illegal budget, and the government actually went after them legally, but they said it would be better to break the law than break the poor. And in the same spirit of that, we had that rebellion last week. And so I feel privileged to welcome onto the show Councillor Ronna Heron, Councillor Alison Clark, Councillor Alfie Hinks, and a fairly frequent guest on the show, Councillor Alan Gibbons. So welcome, everybody. Alfie, why don't you give us a quick rundown as to the kind of context of all this, the scale of the cuts that the city's seen?
Okay, so if we put our mindset back to a few months, maybe before Christmas, when these proposals were being implemented, and we knew at early doors that these cuts were going to come raining down, and we had to wait from central government to see what they were giving into the council to reduce the cuts. But at the same time, ourselves, and I've got to say, a lot of the councillors that are still Labour councillors within the group at the moment were not happy with what was being proposed. We came up with an alternative budget proposal, which would it wouldn't have seen a rise in the council of 1.99%. It wouldn't have seen £11 million put back in, £10 million put into the reserves. It wouldn't have seen £10 million of cuts to the adult care services, and it certainly wouldn't have introduced a £40 green bin charge to people that some people can't afford it. And I've been inundated through my emails to the Everton wards in which I represent, saying, "Look, we can't afford it. We're not paying it." It's as simple as that. So we had these proposals, which sadly was implemented last week. But what was so annoying is that these are the alternative budgets, which I'll explain in a couple of seconds. Is the alternative budget that we tried to push to the leadership, we tried to push into the Labour group, time and time again, and they just would not bring it to the table. At one point, when we had our last group meeting it was on a Sunday, that we were told I was told that your budget will be voted on. So we thought that, okay, it's gonna come to light. We're gonna have a debate over it. We're gonna have a discussion, and there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. They just booted it into the long grass, and basically that's where we were up to in terms of trying to get this alternative budget into the Labour group for discussion. And it annoys me when after the group meeting, obviously when we voted against the budget, is we had an interview with Liam Thorpe from the Echo, and Councillor Nick Small was actually saying that these councillors, these rebel councillors, could have had the opportunity to come in and put their own proposal to the motion or amendments to the motion, when in fact we were still Labour councillors walking into that chamber. So we couldn't have done that. And the fact that we tried weeks and months previous to get this debated, to get it put on to the agenda of the Labour group, and it was just impossible for them to do it. They stopped it at every possible avenue. I decided, obviously we've been suspended, so I decided that people need to know what the alternative budget was. So I put it onto my Twitter account a week last Sunday. And basically, what we put on is we tried to explain what the levelling up paper was. So if I can just go through a few of the points.
Let's come on to those details in a minute, but
Okay.
just you got some big numbers on that tweet, didn't you? Tell us a little bit about the
we got
level of interest.
when I tweeted the proposals that we put on, 48,000 people read it. 48,000 people read that tweet. Now, I don't, people might say, well, they don't live in Liverpool, he lives somewhere else, but I'll tell you, 48,000 people were interested in why there wasn't an alternative budget being debated.
Well, I think it's a phenomenon that's across the country, really, isn't it? Where we're seeing Labour councillors act as fairly willing hatchet people for Tory cuts, and this. I mean, we've seen Keir Starmer when the commissioners got appointed over Liverpool, inevitably going to impose cuts. Keir Starmer welcomed that and said, "Oh, great! It wasn't promised Labour's full cooperation," and the rest of the council seems to have taken that seriously, sadly. Alison O'Ronner, can you give me this? It's not like the first time that Liverpool has seen cuts from the Tory government, isn't it, over the last 11 years and a bit? So, what level of cuts has the city already suffered?
So I think, sorry, Alison, I think I've been going in the chamber, Steve, since 1986 as an officer and later on as a councillor. Just the sheer behaviour as well at that particular meeting was really disappointing as well. But since 2010, 64% cuts we've had. I mean, if you look around, you think, it's going to be, inflation could be increased to up to by 8% in come springtime. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's like this. That's a loss of an average of £440 per household. Or is it more? I'm not sure. But talking about levelling up, it's something that I've been working on at the moment. And they bring levelling up into the city or giving people money, and they think, oh, it's great. We'll put it out there. But people have lost £440 on average. The levelling up, we're only thinking £32 per head back in the city. And we know it's central government that are doing this, but it's one thing I have to say about the National Labour Party. Why aren't they standing up for it? We had a conversation before this meeting about, National Labour Party and, well, it's people in the city like us that are standing up to the cuts and trying to help other people because we're community activists. We know how bad and what it's going to bring to people. It's a difference at the moment. We have people not eating properly. Now it's like, do they eat or heat because of fuel poverty? To add another £40 on for bins when they've already had an increase in council tax is it's just beyond me. I just don't give it a full process whatsoever.
I have got a little clip from because the Northern Echo interviewed Alan and Alfie and Councillor Nick Small, who's from the right of the party. He wanted to try and defend the cuts and said he was proud to vote for them. If you allow me, I'll play that clip for a few minutes, and then people have a little bit more of the context, and we'll examine and probably dismantle what was said during that interview to try and defend what they're doing. So bear with me a couple of minutes, folks.
You obviously are a Labour councillor who voted for the budget tonight. What do you make of the decision of your current, potentially former colleagues now?
Well, I think it's really sad that people aren't supporting the Labour group position on this. I think everyone had the opportunity to feed into that, and I think it was an abdication of responsibility what happened tonight, because the councillors could have moved an amendment. The Lib Dems, the Greens moved an amendment. Other councillors could have done that. They could have moved that, and they didn't do that. They just voted against it. And what they did is jeopardising the future of this city by opening the door to an intervention, a deeper intervention from the government, by putting jobs at risk. 400 plus jobs at risk is what Unison was saying. Children's centres, libraries, frontline services, and it is really disappointing that happened tonight. It was an abdication of responsibility. I was proud to vote for this budget because I think it does protect those services and it takes our city forward.
Alan, I better let you come back on that. An abdication of responsibility, how would you respond?
No, take full responsibility for everything. It wasn't either jobs or services. We talked about a whole series of ideas, and we talked about the use of £10 million of reserves. And I think Nick, really, to take an adversarial position like that is sad and disappointing, and itself an abdication.
£7 million in adult services that you voted through there tonight. When you say that people's livelihoods and jobs are at risk, right? People frontline adult care. I asked the question at the select committee. I asked the question at the Select Committee, £11.7 million worth of cuts, and what impact assessments have you made? What risk assessments have we generically made for these impacts? Such a huge impact. None.
Nick, do you want to come back on this?
Well, I think we have made an impact assessment on this, and we're doing the best in a difficult situation where we're facing government cuts. This is a Tory government that is making these cuts to local government, and what local government needs to do, what Labour local government needs to do, is to stand firm, and we need to put a progressive alternative. That's what the Labour group did tonight, and it was disappointing that people didn't get behind that and people didn't support that when they had the opportunity to debate that within the Labour group over the last few months.
Can I just make a comment that when I made a contribution this evening, it was all about a levelling up paper that was circulated amongst Labour, the Labour group. We had the levelling up paper, and not only did that not involve cuts, not involve £11.7 million to the adult services, wouldn't include a £40 bin charge, but it would be transformative. It would be transformative that we could look to invest and finally get the people of the city to go with them. We've got two sports centres that are derelict. They are on their knees. Everton Park is one of them. £300,000 they're going to pay on a roof. They're putting plaster over a massive wound. We had to be transformative, and we had to make that. There was an alternative paper circulated within the Labour group, and the leadership did not give it the light of day. And that is sad for the people of this city who have had cuts from the Tories, cuts from the commissioners. Okay, we had the opportunity to carry on. Well, Councillor Small, he was in the cabinet over the years gone by. Invest to earn, invest to save. That's the only alternative and it was a credible alternative opposed to what we just witnessed.
But didn't, under the previous administration, where the invest to earn policy was in, there was large levels of cuts implemented. £450 million we talk about. So didn't previous budgets also have lots of cuts in that people voted for?
Talking about invest to earn, invest to save. How are we gonna save for a rainy day? Take 10 million and put it into the piggy bank and let people suffer. 11 million. Why wasn't that 10 million pound put into adult services? It's alarming.
The question I'd ask with that, Liam, is if there was a levelling up paper that was an alternative, if it was a credible alternative, if it stacked up financially. It didn't, by the way. If it did, why wasn't that moved as an amendment tonight? Alfie, you could have moved that. Alan, you could have moved that.
Let me just ask Alan and Anna.
Rejected right the way down the line by the officers, as you very well know. So what we have to do, we have got to go back now, and we have got to make sure, as was promised, that ideas like that are fully costed, debated over months, and implemented. If your Labour group just carries through another conventional cuts budget, this city gets more and more decrepit. We can do better, and we must do better next year.
There's no debate here. Elected Mayor Joanne Anderson said this evening that she'd received the alternative papers. She also said that she was going to look at implementing them in up to the next 2 years. So, there's no debate. It was put forward. That's somebody's opinion that it wasn't robust. But I would suggest that while we've got the commissioners in the city, give them that as a task and finish.
So, Alison, £450 million was the cuts the city's already had. Another 11.7 million in cuts to adult social care now. And Nick Small went from saying that was a Tory imposed cut to saying he was proud to vote for that budget. So what's going on with the Labour Party at the minute? And we'll go on in a little bit to talk about how the party's behaved towards you four as councillors and the other three. But how can the Labour regime, if you like, in the city got voters in the elections and say, vote for us, we're standing up for your interests?
I think that's the problem, Steve, isn't it, really? I mean, one of the reasons that I felt personally that I couldn't support the budget was the fact that, they've raised council tax by an additional 1% specifically for social care. And at the same time, the Tory government have, raised national insurance by 2% for the same purpose, so for social care. So how can I possibly go back to my residents and say, well, yeah, I know you're paying more national insurance and I know you're paying more council tax, but we're cutting social care anyway? I just couldn't do it. And I mean, we've talked about the amount of cuts that have been made in Liverpool over a long period of time. This city has some of the highest levels of deprivation in the country already. And, we've been cut to the bone. Now, people said to me, but you voted for cuts before, and I have. I did vote for cuts before. But there comes a point where you have to say, enough is enough. And that point, for me, was reached this time. For a number of reasons. So particularly this issue of the reserves. To increase the reserves by a further 10.7 million. The reserves are supposed to be for a rainy day. And the point we were making was, well, if it's not raining now, when is it going to be raining? Because cost of living crisis, inflation is rising, the cost of food, fuel. And it's just got to a point now where people, as Ronna said before, that they're having to choose between heating and eating. And I think as Labour councillors, we needed to stand up and say, we can't do this anymore. We need to be fighting back, and we need to be joining with other councils, other Labour councils across the country and saying that, we will not support these Tory cuts.
Ronna, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just going back to something that Nick Small said in that heated debate at the town hall about they're doing it to protect libraries and services and stuff. No, they're not. The libraries aren't safe. They're saying they're safe and they've saved them, the children's centres. No, they're not. Watch the space for next year. They'll put something ludicrous out again and try and save money on them. And there's community libraries in the city, one which I've led for the last 6 years, by the way. And it's not just a library, predominantly books, but it became a welfare centre, a job search, universal credit, CV, breakfast club, and after school. You name it, it's in that library. It's now a honeypot, and we built up a relationship with all them people, with everything that we've done in there. And what if that goes? Where do them people go? It's a safe space for them. They know they'll get help, no matter what it is, when they go there. That's what libraries have become, and they'll jeopardise them once again, and they'll take them away. In some of the libraries, we put the one-stop shop in to save money. I wasn't really a fan of that at the beginning, if I'm honest, but when I was managing the library, I kind of thought, it's a bit of a tricky one. Will it mean that we're safe and it puts us on the agenda for the next few years by rolling all the services into one? I just don't know. I don't know. I've already heard people complain. They don't feel right going into the library. There's nothing confidential about it. It's not a proper service. They're paper free, all the rest of it. So I don't know, Steve. I'm angry at that. I'm really passionate about libraries and public buildings like that. And I think every community needs one, every community. So that's my concern as well.
Definitely. Alan, we haven't heard too much of you yet. Give us a little bit about the plan that you had put forward, and then we'll let Alfie fill in any details on that as well, if there's anything that gets missed.
It segues very well into what Nick Small said, actually, because, not only was there no full debate, but, I wrote either 3 or 4 emails to the mayor and other senior councillors asking for a debate. We asked, for example, for councillors Kushner and Steve Mumby to be able to present at a plenary. Not once were those ideas presented and tested, and we were told they're not robust enough. But I think I've forgotten if it was Alison, I think, who said it was an opinion. It was an opinion. And really, the senior officers should be part of that debate to justify that opinion. The other thing that was intensely dishonest is to say we could have put a motion with a Labour group. You have to get a motion through the Labour group. Now, three of us, Anna Rothery then was in the Labour group, Alfie and myself, we put forward a motion to try and get the ACC debated in an emergency Liverpool City Council meeting. I mean, you're bound by the confidentiality of the Labour promise, but I'm going to say it now. And the three of us got a 12-month warning for doing that. So you can't, on the one hand, say you've got to go through a Labour group and we're going to discipline you if you defy that, and then say, why didn't you put a motion? Because the whole apparatus of the whipping system and the discipline of the Labour group is to prevent you acting as an individual councillor or as a small group of councillors, because that's called factionalism. That's called factionalism. And
there's only one faction allowed in the Labour Party now, didn't you know?
Yeah. Now, the final thing that I just want to say that was intensely disappointing about what Nick Small said was when he tried to counterpose what we were proposing to 400 job losses. Now, I talked to three members of the Joint Trade Union Committee, had a really nice chat, explained what one or two of us were doing as a matter of principle. I mean, then I thought there was only three of us going to do it, you know, because it wasn't organised as a faction. It was people added themselves on when they knew people were really feeling unhappy. And it was never the case that there were going to be, the alternative was 400. That was if no budget was set. That's potentially the possibility. To elide that with what we were saying is intensely dishonest. You know, I would never vote for cuts and I would never vote for job losses. And we would be the first people to join a picket line if there were any job losses. And what I'd say to our friends in the unions is the more that we avoid fighting the cuts and fighting for the interests of our people, the more likely it is in future that there will be job losses. What tends to happen is over the years, your resilience and ability to fight is drained away by not fighting. And we can see that in the number of workers we've got in the workforce. There was 30,000 for Liverpool City Council when I came here. It's a shadow of itself now. And there's agency workers, and it's an aging workforce. When we go out and try to look for expertise, they'll tell you that so-and-so was brilliant and he's just gone off and took his retirement. And you're thinking, this is draining the City Council of its expertise. So for next year, because it's gone through, I think we've got to have a year of debate. There's got to be think tanks, and we shouldn't be arrogant. You know, we don't have all the answers. We should be asking councils like Salford that seem to have had less painful budget processes to give us advice. We should be asking for experts in community wealth building and all the other possibilities, the investment opportunities that Alfie's talked about, and we should be listening for 6 months and then really start to move in on the budget. And then you get a difference over it, and nobody, and not the 47 to be honest, ever put forward an illegal budget. This is the biggest myth in the Labour movement. Nobody has put forward an illegal budget because you can't. You just can't.
Is there, realistically speaking, is there? Sorry, go on, Ronnie.
Sorry, I was just going to say on the back of what Alan said about the staff, the shadow of the staff. I was one of them member of staff for 25 years, and I made a decision to come away because how bad things were getting, and that was in 2010. That was back then. And Alan said about agencies. One of my biggest things around the green bin tax for £40 was about people being able to afford it, of course, but also the pressure on the staff at LSSL. I've got good friends that work there. None of them have a permanent contract. It's temporary contract. They all have mortgages and families. So they don't know from month to month whether they're going to have a job or be taken on for a few extra months. However, the feedback that we've had, and I know other comrades on this call have had, over the £40 green, I'm not paying it. Well, I'll just dump it anywhere. I'll just put it in my paper bin. No, it's them staff that are going to be picking that up. You know, and working extra hours and working hard. So in the long run, it'll cost more money anyway. And that just made no sense to me. It was a no-brainer. That was my concern about that.
Yes, and supposedly the city has a commitment now, you know, to a green kind of manifesto, etc., and reducing pollution, and they're going to be forcing people to, you know, reduce the amount of recycling of green waste that they're doing with this new charge. I think. I mean, it's, you know, it's worth just summarising. I mean, you know, for the one part, this is not a problem that's limited to Liverpool, because we've seen Coventry City Council spend, I think, 10 times more than it would have actually cost to settle the strike of the bin workers in Coventry, trying to break the strike instead by using agency workers. So, this is an endemic problem around the Labour Party, wherever the right wing get in charge, sadly. But, realistically, is there a chance of the current leadership, let's use that word, in Liverpool, actually doing that, what you've suggested, Alan, and listening and spending the time that's necessary to come back with something next year that is not going to impact the people of the city so negatively? Or is it, are they just going to march to the beat of Keir Starmer's and Boris Johnson's drum, which is one and the same drum at the moment? And of course, Tim, we go through it again next year,
Yeah, just say on that, Steve. I mean, they've committed themselves at Labour group meetings. They kept saying, can't do it this year, but we can do it next year. I mean, a number of councillors said that.
They committed themselves to a referendum as well on the mayoral position, and then backtracked on that as soon as it was inconvenient. So I don't go, I want to know what the realistic chances are, not what they promised to do, really, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I've said they've committed themselves. Now, as a council, all you can do, I think, is to scrutinise people and hold them to their words. I mean, the one thing I think, with the people here, we said in advance we wouldn't vote for this budget, and we didn't vote for this budget. I mean, I will never, ever try and make out I've not made mistakes, made loads, but I'll always do what I've said. We're not going to back off from that, and our job over the next year, wherever we end up, as far as I'm concerned, is we've got to hold them to that they are really going to take seriously investment opportunities, capital spending to drive the renovation of the city. Unless you actually do that, I mean, you take a look at that budget, it was fiscally, for me, monetarist, and to me, it's the orthodoxy and the lack of ambition that upset me, because we allowed, without ever protesting, a 50% the cabinet, a 50% rise in the pay of these commissioners. I didn't want the commissioners. Don't think anybody did. But then to stuff their mouths with silver, to backdate it, and give them expenses on top is utterly immoral. Sorry, I've got to be honest.
No, it's fine. I was going to raise that, Steve. It's gone from
let's talk about
700-800.
that. Just so people know what that's about, if they're not in Liverpool, I haven't heard about it, is that these three commissioners were appointed. They got a rate set for what they were going to be doing. Then the government decided that was going to go up by 50% and be backdated to day one. And on top of that, they're getting their costs. And on top of that, they're also now advertising for staff to do their job for them. Because they're supposed to be setting policy and stuff, and they're advertising for people to set policy for them. So that's a further cost to the city. So come on, Ron, and tell us what you make of all that.
Steve, I just think £700-800 a day per day is what the contract was. When some families don't have that spare over a year, it's just a ridiculous amount of money to increase for the lead commissioner to be on £1,200 a day with back pay and all the rest of it, as you say. I just think it just knocks me sick to the pit in my stomach. I just think it's wrong. 3/4 of the way through a financial year, one way we've got to make savings of millions of pounds, and that happens, and they pull that out the bag. I just think it's totally wrong. It's just horrible.
Just to add salt to the wound as well, that they're here, aren't they, to make sure that we provide best value. And how on earth can anybody argue that they are providing best value? It's just ludicrous. Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about the Labour Party's kind of national leadership and their attitude to the city, because I've mentioned it briefly at the beginning of the programme, but to my mind, Keir Starmer, for whatever reason, has decided he needs to declare war on Liverpool, whether it was because it was the most pro-Corbyn city or whatever during Jeremy Corbyn's tenure, or what, I don't know. But we've seen, we've said we're welcome the commissioners. He wrote for the Sun, which is the unforgivable crime in this city, really. When he was challenged on that, he said he'd do it again. He's promoted people to his front bench who have done the same and written for the Sun. We've seen him appoint a Liverpool officer. I mean, I've never heard of Liverpool having Labour having a Liverpool officer before, but suddenly there is one, who during the Corbyn years, went off and campaigned for the Tinge party, the Change UK party, that was, that got called Tinge because of racist comments. We have seen, the imposition of a right winger to oversee the selections, to make sure no left wingers got selected for the council by-elections that were on. We're seeing similar levels of interference, I think, in selections for ongoing council seats, etc. And then on a wider basis, we've seen the mayor claim that there was nothing she could do to prevent an arms fair that the council had previously promised wasn't going to be allowed to happen under its ethical charter, etc. So, it seems like, and we did see the result. We saw the consequences of that in the Merrill election, because normally where it would be an absolute walkover for the Labour candidate, I think she got through on the second round of votes, was it? And a massive fall in the voting level.
That was first round. It was a considerable vote for Stephen Yip.
Yes,
as an independent starting from nowhere, and that should be a warning. And the three by-elections, whereas Tim Jeeves had 86% 2 years ago in Club Moor, it was down to 57%. So yes. I mean, nobody in the Labour Party should be complacent. And I think particularly what people are worried about is when it's one councillor in a seat. All it takes is a local issue, and that could be it. You could have the Liberals having a resurgence. You could have Independents having an impact. You could have the Greens having an impact. Labour should, once it loses its vision and identity of what it's there for, then I think you see that erosion of trust.
I think just to make a quick point, Steve, the city has seen a officer for the Labour Party in Liverpool. Way in the early 90s, when we had a guy called Peter Kilfoyle, who was affectionately known as the Witch Hunter General. And that's and they went about. I mean, this is just reinventing itself again. We're seeing the re-emergence of socialists being hounded and expelled, and any excuse, whatever. I mean, way back in the 90s, they were standing on street corners taking photographs of socialists, putting leaflets through doors, and we've moved on a little bit now with social media, where they control through your social media and expel you for liking something. That's not democracy. That's dictatorship, to censorship, to actually go through people's social media and start looking for every scratch and cranny that they can to get rid of you. And we've all got an opinion. It's called democracy. It's called a difference of opinion. And for someone for it to be appointed as the officer for Liverpool, why is that? Why is that the case? It's Big Brother looking over you.
And the fact that you're getting people kicked out of the party for having liked a tweet by Socialist Appeal 3 years before it was illegal in Labour terms to do that, and yet we've seen somebody who knowingly deserted the party and went off to campaign for a right-wing party that lasted about as long as it deserved to, really.
But I mean, I just want to finish.
waltzing back in and being not just being accepted back in, but being accepted back in and imposed on the rest of the membership of the city as the official Labour representative, so to speak.
I think what's missing here, and I think not for us. I mean, we voted with our conscience last week, and we voted that we're not going to put up. I'm not going to vote for further burden, further misery, further financial restraints on the people of this city. We went into that chamber last week with that attitude. We are representing the people that voted for us, not the party we belong to. Now, people, we're all forgetting, or they're forgetting in all this, is the people themselves, the people who will go out and vote for Labour. We hear it on a doorstep. I voted with Labour all my life, and I'm going to be voting Labour. Well, not anymore, because people are now effective. They're getting pinched in the pockets, in the purses. They're getting told you're going to have to pay for this, you're going to have to pay for that. And who's to blame? Well, we all blame the Tories, obviously, because they're the natural enemy. They're the enemy that have downloaded this harsh reality to us. throughout the last 10 years since 2010. So, but you know, to have administrations take their policies is not acceptable. Certainly when you've got alternatives on the table. If any of us were Labour leaders, we'd be looking at alternatives, not to cut, because that's what the people want us to do. They want us to give us a fair representation and to protect them, not to go down that road. Listen, thanks for voting for me, but you've got a 1.99% council tax to pay. Oh, by the way, you've got a bin charge to pay as well. Oh my God, what's all that about?
I think it's the late Bob Crow said, if you don't fight, if you fight, you might lose, but if you don't fight, you'll always lose. And I think that's people who vote Labour want to see Labour fight like hell. If they can't avoid stuff, but they've fought like hell to avoid it, then at least they've tried. But it's not even that they're just acquiescing. We saw Keir Starmer actively come out and tweet. I think his word he used: "We welcome this development."
Can I just
welcome the commissioners getting imposed in the city, knowing what the commissioners are going to do. Go on, Alan.
Yeah. Twice, I think it was 2018, it might have been 2019, and again in 2021, Liverpool Walton CLP put forward a very mild resolution, actually, that there should be a mass campaign of leafleting through the city to put the blame on the Tories with a demonstration, with lobbies, with mass meetings, and just to nail who is responsible for the cuts. And if that could turn into an even more intense campaign of defiance, great. And that was passed unanimously at the Northwest Regional Conference on 2 different occasions, 2 different years. What was done about it? Nothing. Not one leaflet, not one march, not one meeting, not one planning meeting. That contempt to know that you've passed a motion and actually probably go off the officers in the Labour and just think, well, that's going straight in the bin. There used to be a joke about resolutions at Blackpool and stuff going straight in the bin. Jeremy Corbyn changed the perception of what the Labour Party could be, that we were going to do what we meant, what we said, and we were going to be a member-led party. I'll tell you, it actually does break me heart. It nearly brings me to tears to look at what we had and the numbers involved in our CLPs, the numbers involved in campaigning. Our CLP was on every picket line, every demonstration for asylum seekers, the activity and the energy, and you didn't need to put much effort in. You know what I mean? It was like a roller coaster, and we've lost that. And Alex Nunn's picked exactly the right title for his forthcoming book in the summer, Sabotage.
Yeah.
Twice elected leader, and people in large numbers in this party actually did anything to disparage him, using names like Steptoe to say they would stab him in the chest, to insult Diane Abbott, to use swear words about them to their face. Outrageous bullying behaviour, going off to the television studios and resigning hourly, briefing against them, sitting sulking behind them in Parliament. I mean, you consider that, and then with the stuff we found about the racist and sexist and homophobic comments, the channeling of resources away from marginal seats, this was scandalous. We actually dared to think we could have a democratic, member-led party that respected people. And I've never heard Corbyn lose his temper with anybody. I've met him a lot of times now, and I've seen the way he operates, and I've admired him through most of his career. And he reminds me of people like Tony Benn, who, no matter how much they were goaded, were avuncular and pleasant and reached out a hand. And when we reached out a hand, somebody put a knife through it onto the table. And
Ronna and Alison, did Jeremy Corbyn raise people's expectations, and as that, can that go back in the box? Because it's obvious that the current Labour leadership wishes that could go back in the box, but can you put Pandora back in once you've opened it?
I hope so. I hope so a lot. I'll say everything what Alan just said. I back him up on it, and even referring him to Tony Benn, and I shared a similar a tweet yesterday, a quote about it. What would this man think today if he was still alive? It was his anniversary of his death, Tony Benn, and it makes me think what he'd be making of all this, what's going on, because he just wouldn't love it at all. But I liked Jeremy Corbyn, I like John McDonnell, you know, for all, it gives us all hope. It gives us all hope who work and are involved in communities, a lot of hope, because they had the same ideas as us, they wanted the same things as us, the principles were in the right place. They're decent people who know what's going on out in communities, and you know, they've taken it away from him. They've silenced him, haven't they? He'll never be able to come forward. I hope he does. But again, they're ruling that, aren't they? And they're controlling the whole thing. But they'll never be able to come forward and revive everything that's happened. It would be wonderful.
They've done their best. I mean, Alison, would, you know, now that people's expectations have been raised like that,
yeah, well,
Starmer obviously hopes that they can just go back to business as usual. Yeah. But are people going to tolerate that, or is there going to be a payback?
Well, I think there is a danger that if we don't kind of take advantage of those people who were given hope and were enthused by Corbyn and you know what happened at that time, I think it would be a really, really big mistake, because I mean, if I think about myself personally, I felt politically homeless for, you know, practically all my adult life, really, apart from when Corbyn came into being. I joined the party before Corbyn was elected leader. And I did that because when Miliband lost the election, 2015, I thought it's no use sitting on the sidelines and just throwing things at the television. I've got to get involved and try and change things. And of course, you know, then Corbyn appeared, and you know, well, the rest is history, isn't it? I mean, just amazing, really. But there were thousands and thousands of people who were enthused in that kind of way, and they're still there. And they're back to being politically homeless because they don't feel that the Labour Party represents them, or their values or their principles anymore. And it's such a shame, really, that those people are out there. And I just feel that we need to, in some way, find the ability to harness that.
Yeah.
Because I think if we don't do it soon, then it will be lost, because people are feeling disheartened and demoralised. We've seen the numbers drop within our CLPs. You know, members are leaving. Within the past few weeks, fantastic councillors, Labour councillors. You know, Mandy Clare, who's a councillor in Cheshire, has resigned on International Women's Day because she just felt like she was hitting her head against a brick wall. You know, trying to push you know, a poverty agenda through her council and not being given the support and so on.
Yeah.
And a Labour councillor in Sheffield gone, and the lead Labour councillor in Scotland gone. So socialist councillors are walking from the Labour Party because of what's happening.
Do you think that the leadership actually cares, or is that
No,
is that even part of the plan? Because I don't think personally that they're very interested in winning power.
No, they don't care. They don't care.
I mean, the latest thing in Liverpool is them imposing the delegate structure and all the CLPs and stuff, isn't it? Ronna, we'll come back to that in a sec. So you say what you were going to say.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I'm just sorry. I was just going to explain. A few years ago, in my own CLP, I was sabotaged for voting for Jeremy Corbyn, I was approached by current members who are still in the Labour administration to come forward to have a meeting because they knew how socially active I was in the community, how many people knew me, how long I'd lived here, etc., etc., and what I could bring with me. And I went ahead, I was going forward to panel, and I was told literally to my face, "You're involved with Corbyn, you're not getting in." And that's going back a few years ago. And I was alarmed. I just said, "What that?" I don't know what I answered. I can't remember now, but it really threw me for even then for people to like look in to see who I was, where my background was, and say no because you're involved with Corbyn, and told the MP from my constituency to watch your back, and they were the very words, "Watch your back," because I'm a Corbyn and that's just. I've never really said that out loud to people, but it's a fact, and that's what's happening around all the CLPs. That is what's happening.
I think I'm proud to say that our CLP Walton, we voted unanimously for an all-member constituency party where people at the point of entry membership can come up and vote and take part in the discussion and being able to vote, and to have that rug pulled away from us it's just not right. It's just not democracy. It's not. You know, we got told you're going back to the delegate position and that's it. Well, can we vote on it? No, you're not voting on it. You're going back to it and that's it. And you know, that's the. You know, as
just
Alan
to
said
explain
earlier,
for people who might not be aware of what that's about. Within the party rules, there are allowances for two forms of constituency meeting of all the members. One is an all-member meeting where everybody gets to attend the meeting and have their say. One is a delegate meeting where the members have to elect a set of delegates to go from each branch and attend the meeting, but the vast majority of the members of the party will never get to go to the general meeting of the CLP and actually vote on those decisions. And as a general rule, the delegate structure is a lot more easy for the right wing to control, and the all-member one is a bit more of an unknown quantity for them, which is why they don't like it. And you know, particularly in a city like Liverpool, I think if they allowed members to have democracy, we know what would happen. We'd have left-wing people in every position. So they've got to do something to try to stop that from happening, and they do that with no regret or shame, as far as I can tell. And then, in the same breath, they'll claim to be democratic and supporting democracy and empowerment and all the other buzzwords that mean nothing really. So the last bit of the show, we've got just over 10 minutes left. What's happening with yourselves with regard to the Labour Party at the minute? Because you got pretty promptly suspended, and does the party look like trying to just mess you around for edges to stop you from forming an independent group on the council, and is that something that you intend to do? So I don't know if anybody here actually thinks that the party might let them back in. So are they going to just drag it about and drag it out? Are you going to let them?
Well, I mean, we're not going to put up with being left in limbo. I mean, I think we can say this now. We've sent in letters, at least we've started sending letters individually saying that we want a prompt resolution of our cases, because how can you be a councillor, elected councillor, and then left in a limbo? I mean, it's an odd position. Like, we have street surgeries, and I was about to do my letter, and I've got to go through, because I'm suspended, the officer for the independents, but I'm still putting that I'm a Labour councillor on the letter. Now, you've got to resolve that. They've got to tell us what the discipline, and they must know. I mean, come on, this doesn't need a long investigation. They know there was a budget and they know we voted against it. That's the evidence. I mean, I could do LA law in 10 minutes on that. You don't need a long investigation. We don't need Columbo and his Mac and his dodgy car to come along and try and work out what happened. This is easy. You know, Patrick McGowan killed the dog with a spade in front of your eyes. So tell us what our punishment is, or give us a gold medal. I'd go for the latter, because I do like the gold medal. I can do the Benny Hill salute. Come on, be honest. We've been honest about what we said. Be honest. Give us our result, and then we can decide what we do next.
I mean, somebody asked earlier on in the programme, where's the Ford report? And, so we know how long Labour likes to drag out investigations and hope that the problem will never materialise, but or it'll be neutered by the time that it does.
Well,
I think
tell them Lord Lucan's got it.
Alison,
I think Steve. Sorry.
Go on, Alfie. Go.
Yeah, I think, Steve, irrespective of any decision what's made by the Labour Party with our future and whatever, you know, irrespective of which way this goes, we represent the people that's elected us. And that's the most important fundamental issue here, that we represent the interests. I represent a ward in a constituency that lies the bottom of 153, is it, Alan? 153 on the list?
Constituencies.
533. We are lying on the bottom of the most deprived constituencies in the country. I represent the most deprived ward within that constituency. So where does that go on the map? So as far as I'm concerned, whatever I voted for, wherever I represent, it is for them people of Everton that I represent on their interest and no others.
Well, that raises an interesting point, because at the moment, you know, when you're in limbo, as Alan put it, you know, you're not able to do that job as well, are you? Because there are committees to sit on, there's various things, and you know, the Labour Party's already shown they have no intention of letting non-Labour councillors sit on committees if they can avoid.
Well, no, I've just got to correct you on that, because the strange as it is, as strange as the suspension came, as swift as it came, we were also told that you can keep your committees, you can keep your select committees, you can still represent them, which was very, very strange. Okay,
well, that's interesting. But it's a fact that if, you know, there are 3 councillors who already left the Labour Party. Sam Gorst, Sarah Morton, and is it Sam Morton? Sorry.
Anna Rothery.
And Anna Rothery. And there are 7 who got suspended last week. Now, assuming that those councillors all end up being independent councillors and decided to form together into an independent group on the council, you'd only be too short of forming the official opposition on the council, wouldn't you?
That's the reality.
And I'm sure it's a reality that they want to try and avoid for as long as possible. So I expect if it was left up to them, they would, they would try to drag that out as long as they possibly could. Hopefully for them beyond the point where there's a new election and they'll hope to de-seat you or whatever. Yeah. But you know, if it came to that, would you leave and form an independent group, or is that something that you can't say on air? Given the ongoing proceedings,
that's a discussion that we have to have amongst ourselves. I
think people think we colluded, Steve, at the beginning, as Alan raised earlier on. It was never like that. It was like an organic. It was just a natural. I heard that. Well, I knew all along Alan wasn't. I made no secret that on that Labour group on the Sunday mentioned before that I voted against both budgets. One was to the green bin tax, and if you didn't vote for that, what they threw in, the other one, was your M&F, your Male and Labour Fund, what we use for our communities, to subscribe to fair share, for fuel poverty, for youth provision. Why would you vote for that? So you wouldn't want to vote for both, and I made it no secret, and that's when I heard other people were doing the same, is when I think we all really did, didn't we? We come on board from between that Sunday and Monday, and I think that's what's happened. So I don't know, but at the moment there's nothing in the pipeline, is there? I mean, the others will tell you the same thing. We just don't know. Depends, I think, from the response from the Labour Party, doesn't it? A lot, you know, and what happens.
The one thing I will say is, whichever road it takes, there is going to be a substantial group of socialists that are not going to divert from this political position. Now, the Labour Party has to decide how it thinks that proceeds. You know, be absolutely clear that narrative of no cuts and invest in this city and make this city better, that absolutely is going to be what this group of people put forward. How we put it forward, we'll see. The discussions are just beginning. The one thing I will say on the collusion thing that Ronna raised, one of the councillors I had never actually had a conversation with. She's lovely. I'd never had a conversation with Joanne Calvert until this week. You know, just the some councillors you've actually, you know, by accident or whatever, you've never actually been in the same room as or stood next to. And so anybody who tried to make out, we planned this in advance, Jackanory, not true, you know. But there's a political cohesion once you take that step.
Yeah.
Yes, and I mean, speaking of that, and obviously don't name any names, but have you had other councillors giving any hints or indications that they might be prepared to join you and do that for the sake of actually standing up for people properly?
No, I don't think we've had any approaches or any indications. I think the natural political progression of this, as how it moved forward into the weeks and months, and where we end up on what sides of the chamber that we end up on, it could be a beacon to some people by going, if they're over there and they're voting for that, and I feel ashamed voting for this side, I've had enough of this side, then they counterweigh the balance of their principles of why they were elected as a councillor in the first place. So it's not impossible to think that you've got sleeping councillors over there that's probably comes to the last year, had enough, don't want to vote for any more cuts. It's there. If that happens, then there's an alternative.
And I mean, you guys are all in pretty safe Labour wards, as I understand it, still, despite the goings on. But I think that would be a very easy. The fact that you've stood up for people against cuts will, and the Labour Party has pushed those cuts through. It's not going to be an easy sell for them on the doorstep when it comes around to election time.
I think
any councillors who are sitting in wards where the Greens or the Lib Dems are, threatening to take the seats anyway, will be getting very worried, I think, because it's propaganda ready made for them.
I think what's interesting, what you just said, Steve, is during our debates within the Labour group, there was prime councillors that were standing up and saying, you put this bin charge through, you put that through, we're going to lose seats. You can bet your bottom dollar that a quarter of the people in this group will not be here next year. And they're aware of that. They're aware of the consequences of what they've put through.
That's the thing, Steve. The evening of the council meeting itself, when it was public knowledge what we were going to do by the media on the Monday morning, and for me personally, looking around the chamber thinking, wow, I wondered if he, I wondered if she, just not knowing, but know what kind of community person they are, and then them not. I just thought, that's me. I'm not a political careerist. I never have been. I'm a community activist. So there's the difference. And I think a lot of people might think the mayoral model will be scrapped next year. The leader and committee model will come back, and then will I have a position? Will I have anywhere to go? And I think a lot of it rested on that. And I'll be honest, but that's not being true to yourself. It's not being true to who you were when you were elected as a representative. That's not for people out there. That's for your personal gain, isn't it? And that's just not for me.
I think just on that quick point is we've got a consultation process about to begin about should we have an mayor or should we haven't. They certainly ruled out the fact of there won't be no referendum because of the cost of it. Hold on a minute. The people of the city are the cost. The people of the city should have had that opportunity to say, look, irrespective of the money, you've just given a 50% pay rise to commissioners. You're spending £4 million a year on commissioners, and you can't spend £240,000 or £400,000 to ask the people of this city whether we want this elected mayor or not. I think we should have had the. I voted for. I wanted to go for a referendum, but because we were sold this story of the costings of it and how much costly it was. And then when you take a look at the commissioners and what they've just done, and it's insurmountable of what they chose.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, however we get that, I mean, the mayoral model to me is a busted flush, and it's got to go. No question about that. And I'd consider both the other models. I tend to go for leader cabinet, but I'd look at both the others. But I mean, having a mayor on £80,000, I think it was originally posited as a kind of a commercial sell. That the city would put itself forward on the marketplace, and it'd be for property developers and investment in the city. I think that's what was behind it. And to me, it reeks of boss hog politics. You can nominate people to be on, and we're not doing, but you could nominate people to be on that cabinet who are business leaders and stuff. No, I mean, I'm sorry, but everybody, it has to be the elective principle, however we do it. And I don't think the mayoral model has worked at all, and I think we need to return to something which is about elected councillors 100%.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think the problem is where you have a leader in cabinet, that there's still a lot of the same problems. I mean, one of the points that we've been making in relation to the budget is the fact that as backbench councillors, you actually don't really get that much say at all. At the moment, the mayor and cabinet make the decisions, and then we're all expected to just nod those through. Now, exactly the same thing would happen with a leader in cabinet. There needs to be changes to either of those systems to make them more democratic. And if we don't do that, to me, it doesn't matter whether you have a leader cabinet or a mayor in cabinet, because there's very little between the two. And as a Labour group, that's been debated, and people acknowledged that there needed to be changes, no matter whether we had a mayor or a leader, but they won't happen.
On that note, we're going to have to finish, folks, because we're run up against the end of our time. But I do thank everybody for their participation. It's been really good to hear, and I think there's a lot of support out there for the stand that you've made, and I trust that will continue to be shown regardless which rosette you wear in at the next election, because we need people who are going to stand up for the people that they're representing. So thank you ever so much for that.
One red, Steve. Our blood will always beat red. Our hearts will.
Well, yeah, it should be the Labour Party changing their colours at the moment, but everybody who's watched the show as well, I appreciate that. If you watch on catch up, thank you for that. Do share and spread the word about it as well, and keep watching for our Socialist Telly output. There will be another show coming this Thursday evening with some of the folk from Coventry and the bin strike there, and who've again been mistreated by the Labour Party and have been suspended for standing up.
Solidarity with the strikers.
Yeah.
Yes, and by the and suspended by the council as well as a victimised as a union rep is absolutely unforgivable. But so that'll be well worth watching same time on Thursday night. Otherwise, I will see you next week on Squawk Talk, and keep up with the rest of the Socialist Telly output. Have a great evening, everybody, and enjoy what remains ahead of the week. Take care.
Thank you.